You ever sit back and realize how much of your peace depends on the boundaries you set or the ones you don't? Sometimes we go through life thinking we're protecting ourselves when really we've built walls so high no one can ever get in. Other times we tell ourselves we're being kind, open, and available, but what we've really done is left the door wide open for people to walk all over us. So today, I want to ask a question that might sound simple, but it's one of the hardest to answer honestly. Where are your boundaries? Because the truth is, boundaries aren't just about saying no. They're about knowing yourself, what you value, what drains you, and what deserves your yes. Let's take the mask off and really talk about it. Psychologists often describe boundaries as falling into three categories: rigid, porous, and healthy. And before you try to label yourself, let's be real. Most of us shift between them depending on the situation or the person. Rigid boundaries are like having a fortress around your emotions. The walls are tall, the gates are locked, and nobody's getting in, period. People with rigid boundaries usually protect themselves because at some point, vulnerability didn't feel safe. Maybe they were hurt, betrayed, or constantly let down. So now they've learned to rely on themselves and only themselves. But here's the thing. While rigid boundaries can keep out pain, they can also keep out love, support, and real connection. You might find yourself feeling lonely or misunderstood, even when people are trying to care. Let me ask you this. When was the last time you let someone show up for you without assuming they disappoint you? Now, on the flip side, we have porous boundaries. These are people who say yes when they mean no, who feel responsible for everyone's feelings and guilty when they finally choose themselves. It's like emotional blending. Your needs disappear because you're constantly prioritizing everyone else's. Porous boundaries can look like love or loyalty, but really they come from fear. Fear of rejection, fear of conflict, fear of being seen as selfish. But remember this, people pleasing is just another way of seeking safety. So think about this. How many of your yeses are actually quiet no's you were too afraid to say out loud? And then there are healthy boundaries, the sweet spot. These are flexible yet firm. They protect your energy without isolating you. Healthy boundaries sound like, I can help you, but not right now. Or, I care about you, but I won't allow you to speak to me this way. They allow connection and self-respect to exist in the same space. It's the balance between compassion and clarity. And here's what's powerful. When your boundaries are healthy, you stop living in reactions to other people's behavior. You start living in alignment with your values. Let's take this deeper, because boundaries aren't one size fits all. They shift depending on where we are and who we're with. In professional relationships or at work, rigid boundaries might look like being overly guarded or unwilling to collaborate. Porous ones might mean overworking, taking on everyone's task, or letting people cross lines because you don't want to seem difficult. Healthy boundaries in the workplace, they sound like, I'm available during business hours, or that's outside my role, but I can connect you with someone who can handle that. You don't lose your professionalism. You just stop confusing being helpful with being used. In love, rigid boundaries can look like keeping your partner at arm's length, never fully letting them in emotionally. Porous ones might look like losing yourself in the relationship, adopting their moods, their goals, even their identity. But healthy boundaries, those say, I can love you deeply and still be me. They create room for two individuals to grow side by side, not merge into one person. Ask yourself, when you fall in love, do you make room for someone or do you disappear inside of them? And finally, the family piece, the hardest one for most of us. Because family is where we first learn what boundaries even are. Rigid family boundaries can mean emotional distance. Everyone handles things separately. No one really talks. Porous ones look like over-involvement. Everyone's in everyone else's business and privacy doesn't exist. Healthy family boundaries look like mutual respect, support, and communication that doesn't demand guilt or control. But let's be honest, most of us didn't grow up seeing that. So we carry those patterns into adulthood, thinking they're normal. And that's exactly what we're going to unpack in the next episode. So this week, I want you to notice, how do your boundaries show up? Are they rigid, porous, or healthy? And more importantly, what experiences taught you to build them that way? Because before we can change how we protect ourselves, we have to understand why we started protecting ourselves in the first place. Thank you for watching this week's episode of Mask Off Mondays. I hope something in today's conversation helps you take one more layer off and get closer to your authentic self. Remember, peace begins where the pretending ends. And don't forget to join me next week as we dig into how different cultures teach us our boundaries, what we accept, what we ignore, and what we're finally learning to unlearn. Until then, keep removing the mask one Monday at a time.